Hi, Gina. Welcome to the Happy Healthy Caregiver podcast.
Hello. Thank you for having me again.
Yeah, delighted to have you on the podcast. I know you've done a guest blog post and some other things for us, but I don't know that you've been a guest on the Happy Healthy Caregiver podcast
You're
yet.
right. Yes, you're right. You're right.
So, but we've known each other for a while and we've been keeping
Mhm.
our eyes on each other, and you've had quite a year, and we're going to definitely talk through that. But first, we always kick off the show with some words of inspiration, encouragement from the Happy Healthy Caregiver jar. Would love to get your thoughts on this.
Okay.
This is a great gift, by the way, if someone's listening, for yourself as a family caregiver or someone you care about, to kind of just sometimes, we need it right when we need it, and it's easily accessible that way. So this says sleep is the best
Mm,
meditation, and that's from the Dalai Lama, who we got to listen to everything the Dalai Lama says.
I love that. Sleep is so important.
How is your sleep these days, Gina?
My sleep's usually always good.
Okay, good.
Yeah. But I know that sleep is so good for your brain care. So
Hmm.
that's a great saying to start this off.
Yeah, it's just a good reminder. It's, for the longest time for self care, it was so focused on nutrition and exercise, but sleep is really deserves just as much attention.
Yes, absolutely.
So we, especially with as we're living longer and we need our brains, we want them to be around for us. So, well, very cool. Well, let's dive into caregiving. We're going to talk about self care and all that. But I love the story about your parents, and you were more of a supportive caregiver. Is that fair to say?
Yes,
And
yes.
with
I
your
was not yep, I was not the direct caregiver. So, my mother was diagnosed with Alzheimer's at 65, which I think is fairly young.
yes.
And yeah, and she lived with it for 5 years. She died just shy of 71. And her and my father had been married for almost 50 years, and he was a great caregiver to her. I live in Washington, D.C. My whole family's in California,
Mm.
but I was very active and involved, I should say, with everything that they did. I spoke to my parents every day. I flew out once a month almost. I had a
Mm.
very understanding boss. And so I was really able to help with the caregiving, not on a daily basis like my dad did, which is so different, but I was able to help him and understand what her needs were. But also supporting the caregiver is so important.
Hmm.
That's just one of the hardest jobs anyone can have, and you worry sometimes more about them than the person living with Alzheimer's or whatever it might be.
It's so fair to say. I mean, I think we have talked about long distance care, remote caregiving from
Mhm.
afar, but like, you being on site once a month, I mean, I'm sure for your dad, just knowing Gina's coming a
Yeah.
few weeks was probably a big godsend to him. What are some other things as a remote support caregiver?
Yeah.
Because I mean, people need ideas. I think sometimes it's like, oh, I'm too far away. It's like, no, we've already
Hmm.
proven people that we can remote work. So
Yeah,
we can do
exactly.
this.
One thing I did was my dad liked to golf once a week, but he felt like he couldn't get away. So I worked probably a month out at a time and emailed 15 of my mother's closest girlfriends and scheduled somebody a month, every week for a month, I would have it so he could go play golf. So it was a commitment of at least 5 hours of coming to visit her. And they lived about 2 hours from all their friends. So I was responsible for scheduling all those so he could have that time to himself and get away. And he just always had guilt about that. I said, you can't have guilt. You've got to get out of the house. We've got one of her dearest friends coming. She will be fine. So that was definitely one of the main things I did. But the other was I called my mom every day and we would just talk about whatever, the weather, you name it, to give him a break of her being his shadow. So
Hmm.
he could go into the office and pay bills, that he could go and do something without her being on him. So I would try to talk to her, if we couldn't get it for 30 minutes, I would call her 3 times a day just as a distraction so he could have that break. So, and I always encouraged her girlfriends I said, just call, talk about nothing. It doesn't matter. But, you have to have thick skin. If she says, I don't want to talk to you and hangs up the phone, you just call right back or
Yeah,
you call the
10
next
minutes
day.
later, you could
Yes.
try again. Yeah,
Do
I
not
think
take it personally.
it's good for you. I think, Gina, you to know that you were managing expectations like that up front, because I feel
Uh-huh.
like the worst things people can do as friends of a couple like your folks is just to just retreat. And because it's
Yes.
uncomfortable for us, as friends, we don't show up. And you made that, easier for them. You gave them the exact thing that they could do
Exactly.
to help them. Like, this is what help looks like. This is how we can help you. And I'm sure for them, they felt like they were making a difference.
Yeah, and I did have to explain to them. And the first thing I said really was, you need to have thick skin.
Mm.
Don't take it personally. This is the disease. This is not her. And they knew that. They knew who she was before the disease. But trying to make them not afraid of being around her. Because yeah, I mean, people do, you kind of see what people are not are capable of, but some people and friends, it's a hard thing to be around. So you kind of know who can handle it, who can't, and those who can't doesn't mean they weren't good friends. That's a difficult
Yeah,
thing for them.
we got different friends for different situations, I feel like,
Exactly.
like
Yeah.
what well you I feel like you understood the disease much, and maybe you researched it, but and you knew the of what could happen to your dad, and we're doing some preventative things there. Where did that come from? Where did this
I
anticipation of
I don't know. So
okay.
my grandmother, my dad's mother had it, but we weren't around her a lot. She either was diagnosed quite late or my grandfather hid it for a long time, but she really only lived with it for a year
Mm,
and we weren't that exposed to it. So, and I read one book, The 36-Hour Day. That was it. I didn't watch movies. I didn't want to read articles. It was too personal and too difficult, but I was just very attuned to what my mom was doing and saying and my dad's reaction. So I handled it very calmly and very differently from my siblings. I have a twin sister. She handled it very differently than I did. She didn't really change her behavior in interacting with my mom. She still talked to her the same way and would maybe get frustrated. I tend to I interacted differently with my mom
mm.
because we're living in her world now. And so you have to change your behavior. They're not going to change theirs.
Yeah.
And I
You
don't
have a
know
broken
how
brain. It's a broken
yes,
brain. Yeah.
I don't know how I was able to adapt so quickly to that. I've never really thought about it, but I wasn't experienced with it. I didn't study it. I just was very in tuned with how my mom was progressing, reacting, and how I was able to calm her down.
Mm-hmm. It's good. It's hard to see, like, once you know better a little bit, like it's hard to watch it play out in other people. And it's like but no shame, no guilt on y'all. Like, if you're listening and you're like, I don't know if I'm doing the right stuff. Like, we don't. We make the best of decisions, and we do the best with the information we have at the time.
Right.
And I'll link to Teepa Snow. She knows how to communicate. She's had her on the 36-hour day. We'll definitely put that in the show notes too. Your parents had this sweet love story. First of all, they
Mm-hmm.
were high school sweethearts. My husband and I also met in high
Uh,
school. He married my prom date, and then your dad, like, your kind of worst case scenario happened, where even though your preventative measures of making sure he didn't burn out, he got his golf, he got breaks from
mm-hmm.
you, he made a wish.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
tell us a little bit about that.
So yes, they were high school sweethearts since junior year.
Wow. Okay.
So their birthday was 7 days apart. And my parents had a good marriage. We had a really good, a great family, great
Hmm.
growing up. We were very fortunate. My parents they used to tell us, they didn't say it exactly like this, but they kind of put their marriage first before the kids. And I've always appreciated that because without a strong marriage, the family doesn't quite, succeed. And
Yeah.
so they had a really good marriage. And um, he was very loyal to her during the illness, took great care of her. She died on Halloween 2011.
Mm,
And then 3 months later, he made it through her birthday, which was February 4th, their first birthday not together since they were 17.
wow.
Um, and then 7 days later, on his 71st birthday, my brother and his wife took him out to dinner, and they brought a little dessert out with a candle, and he made a wish, and he dropped dead 30 minutes later.
Wow.
Um, and it was of a broken heart, I'm convinced, because my dad had a bad heart. He had rheumatic fever when he was 9, so his heart was never 100%, but he was very active. But he was healthy that day, and I truly believe that he wanted to be with her.
Mm.
So we lost both of them within 3 months of each other, which was really difficult. But for me, it was just, in a way, a blessing.
Hmm.
I wanted them I wanted them to be together. And
It,
I didn't want my dad to grow old without my mom. My mom could have grown old without my dad. Um, but I didn't want him to, and he didn't.
it's so interesting. Both of my parents, Gina, are deceased as well, but it is comforting, I think, to know that they're hanging out, and
Yes.
that they have each other. So, mom did meet my dad in high school. So it was her 2.0. She was her first husband passed, but um, I think that is comforting for us to know
Yeah.
that they're together, especially with a long relationship like they had. Well,
Hmm.
then this inspired you to start your business, your nonprofit, I should
Yes.
say,
Yes.
the Bob and Diane Fund in 2016. So a few
Hmm.
years later, and to support visual storytelling that documents Alzheimer's disease and
Exactly.
dementia. And to give us the notes about how this happened, like
Yeah.
how this idea.
So it took a few years because, like I said, during my mother's illness, I did not read a lot. I never watched a movie about Alzheimer's. But then it got easier. And I've been working at National Geographic. I worked there for 21 years, and I'm a huge supporter of photographers. It's a tough business for them. And I was in a position in 2016 where I had some extra cash, and I wanted to do something for photographers and give them a grant in some way. And I was talking with a friend, I mentioned a very random um, way of doing it in a country that where people would really appreciate it and need it. And he said, "You have no connection to this country. Why don't you do it on Alzheimer's and make it about your parents?" And I was just like, how have I never thought about this? So that is how the Bob and Diane Fund started. And I wanted to name it after both of them because Alzheimer's affected both of their lives. I mean, all of our lives, but really the two of them. And I wanted to honor them. So what we started in 2016 it was the first grant of its kind. And we give a $5,000 grant to a photographer worldwide, any photographer who is already working on a story related to Alzheimer's or dementia. And the 5,000 is to help them finish it, or to help get it published into a book, or help pay for an exhibit. And it's really to bring a visual awareness to this disease that is so difficult to understand if you have not lived in it.
Mm.
And that was really the drive behind it. And working at National Geographic in the position that I was in, I knew a lot of publications and photo editors and of that kind. And Time.com announced the grant. And we just did not know if we were going to get 3 submissions or 100. I had no idea what was out there. And surprisingly, well, first we got a lot of press on the submissions
Great.
because it was the first of its kind. So we were so lucky with that. But the first year, I think we received almost 80 submissions from 30 different countries.
Mm.
I mean, I was just blown away.
Well, it
So,
knows, yeah, it knows no race, it knows no gender,
mm-mm,
it knows no geography. Like
right,
dementia, and like to your point, it affects different people. What I like too about the photography is versus watching a movie or reading a book, it's like you are filling in your kind of your own story, and you're
exactly.
seeing what's relatable, and just the everyday moments of it. It's not the,
Hmm.
not the big flamboyant story necessarily. It's the everyday
Yeah,
moments.
and it could be any type of story about it. It could be your personal story, your parent, your grandparent, your neighbor, a friend. It could be science related. You could do scans of the brain and have it next to a picture of the person living with it. It could be about a caregiver taking care of somebody with dementia. It could be anything.
Mm.
We really looked at the photography. And then once we really liked the photography, then we'd look at the proposal. So yeah, so the first year in 2016, we have two board members who do the judging, Sarah Lean, who was the director of photography for National Geographic at the time, and Chip Somadavia, who's a photographer for Getty Images. And then we had a guest judge who was Marianne Golan, the director of photography for the Washington Post. So we're having like people in the
Yeah, doesn't get
industry
better than that, Gina.
looking at this work, and which is really amazing because now National Geographic this year has done two online stories, and they have come to me both times and said, send us what you have. And I'll send them the names of people whose stories I think would work with them. The Washington Post has come to me and done the same. So it's been really,
Mm.
amazing. But the first year we were published in Time, New York Times, Huffington Post, ARP, I mean, NPR, and internationally. So the work is really getting out there, and that is what my goal is.
I
And
love
that's
that.
what yeah,
Yeah, it's
is
more than just the grant, to your point. Like it's
absolutely.
it's the, reminded me when you were talking about how well networked you are. My dad used to
Yeah.
always tell us that life is a contact sport, he would say. So, um
Yes, it's
yes,
contacts. I like that.
life is a contact
Yeah.
sport. So I have a lot of dadisms, but that one definitely sticks with me because you just don't know where the relationship is going to take you.
It,
Well, you're getting ready to announce so do 2022. By the time this podcast come out, all the submissions will be in. You'll be going through
yep.
your process of choosing the 2022 grant recipient. And then how do you announce the winner?
So we judge usually the end of October, early November. For the last five announcements, except for the very first one. Now the Washington Post announces our winner every year. We are so fortunate for that. So we announce in November, which is National Caregivers Month. So that's in honor of my dad. We usually have to work around the Washington Post schedule because we love
Mhm.
to get the front page of the health section. That's our goal. So once that's announced, and once we have the winner, I then start working on getting who I'm going to market it to, meaning if it's a photographer in Boston, I look for every publication and online publication in that area. If it's someone in Sweden, I am really marketing that area. So I just pull out my contacts and just start pushing it out there and trying to get it as, published online in print as much as possible. I reach out to a lot of the dementia, Alzheimer's and dementia community. Just for the record, I always say Alzheimer's, but I'm definitely meaning all types of dementia.
For sure.
Yeah, so there's a huge community out there. There are so many organizations. So I'm really trying to reach those areas and have them share it with their community.
Yeah, well, I'm sure my book is part of the Alls authors community, so they're a great
Yes,
community
yes,
that people can
they
check
are.
out. And we've had a lot of great folks on dementia talk. So yes, well, we'll do our part, Happy Healthy Caregiver, of getting the
Oh,
word out there
thank
when you
you.
with this podcast, and then also with the winner when it's announced. What, as a person who's listening, that's like, I want to be a part of this, I want to help in some way. Like, how can the listeners, what are the variety of ways the listeners can support the Bob and Diane Fund?
Oh, thank you for asking that. Well, following us on social media, so we're on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. That is always helpful. Sharing anything that we put out is great retweeting and, posts we do, or most importantly, our grantees work. And, if you want to donate to us, it's the Bob and Diane Fund.org. And we put that towards the grant. We also, so separate of the $5,000 grant, we do a $3,000 mentorship. And
Mm.
that is from someone who has submitted. And it's a project that it didn't win, and I don't know if it will, but I really like the proposal behind it, and I want to support this photographer. So we will give $3,000, and then they'll work with one of our board members for 6 months to a year to fine tune the project. So we give that, and then we do some angel grants. There was a photographer who didn't win, and she wanted to discuss why. So we did a Zoom call and we talked about it. And it was during COVID, and she shoots film. And she's like, I have like 12 rolls still, but I'm really hurting because of COVID. So I just haven't developed them. And I said, well, how much do you need? And she's like, it was like $300. And I said, oh, well, we'll pay for that, because if it's not developed, no one's going to see this work. So I need to get this work out there. So
Right.
we'll do things like that. We gave $1,000 to a woman who was working on a book, and she needed some support. And so I love giving just these angel grants. So we give about 10,000 a year. And then we've been working with HFC, which is Hilarity for
Yeah.
Charity, Lauren Miller Rogan and Seth Rogen's organization. And we've been partnering with them for Humans of Dementia.
Mm.
And we are doing contests for high school and college, and photo and written essays. And it's a great program. I
Yes,
really
we'll link
like
to
that.
that too.
Yeah.
Say it one more time. Humans of
Of dementia.
of dementia.
Hmm.
Yes, I've seen that, but I will link to it so people can
Yeah.
get more information.
Thank
Because
you.
go to the show notes, and then yeah, just going back to your posts, your tweets, like that is how people it's a very small way. Like if you don't have a dollar, you can
Exactly.
reshare, because that's going to help connect people together. And
Hmm.
again, we're stronger together. I love
And
that.
also giving to any Alzheimer's organization. But I always say, not everyone, but I'm the most people can give 2 Starbucks coffees. That's what I always write on Facebook when I'm raising money on Facebook. Just donate 2 Starbucks coffees, $10.
That's
That's,
right.
yeah, just sacrifice 2 coffees for the week, and it goes a long way.
I love it. I love it. What do you think your parents would think about all this, Gina?
Oh my gosh. They wouldn't be surprised. My parents were such giving people. They really taught us how to give. And this is my gift to them. They wouldn't be surprised by this. They would be totally touched and honored for sure, but not surprised that I'm doing it. It's very much kind of my
Yeah,
my
I think
thing.
their legacy lives on through you, and then
Yes.
even after, through this fund. And I'm going to link to Bob and Diane's love story, which is on your blog, which is
Oh,
so sweet.
thank
And then
you.
I will link to last year's 2021 winner while we're waiting for
Great.
this one to come out. So let's pivot here, because you've also,
Okay.
like, while this is happening, Gina, like you're doing all these amazing things for photographers. Your own health hit a hurdle.
Yeah.
And you've been sharing a bit of that on
Hmm.
social media. But first of all, how are you? What happened? Like, if people didn't like you before, they're gonna like you even more now.
Oh, thank you. I'm doing great. So in January, I was diagnosed with breast cancer. Um,
Just of this
I,
year.
yes, just this
Yes.
year.
Oh wow.
Yeah, I'd had the mammogram in October, and then I had to go for a follow-up, and I kind of postponed that follow-up, unfortunately. And so I got diagnosed in January, and I wasn't shocked because I've always had unusual mammograms. Like, I don't know what the word is, but I always have to go back for a biopsy and a sonogram and all that
Mm,
every single time, and it's always negative. And I do not like mammograms. Not that any woman ever says they do, but they're
no.
very difficult for me. So years ago, in my 40s, I would skip them often because I would have PTSD over the one from a couple years before. but in the last, I don't know, 10 years, maybe less than that, I've been going every year. And I was negative a year ago, a
Mm.
year before, I should say. So yeah, so January I was diagnosed, and we decided on a double mastectomy and radiation, and then a couple weeks before surgery, maybe 10 days, they called and said the cancer was progressing more than they had
Mm.
thought or hoped, and I had to start chemotherapy as soon as possible. So I had to postpone surgery till summer and start 4 months of chemo. Um, but maybe this goes with how I handled my mom. I don't know, but I handled it really well. To me, it was an inconvenience. It really was. But I thought my job had changed. I left National Geographic. Life was much easier for me. I didn't have my dream trip to Sicily planned. I just had finished that. So I thought, well, if I'm going to get breast cancer, right now
I can
really
fit
is a
this
good
in.
time.
That's horrible, but
Yeah,
yeah.
I have
Yeah.
no trips I'm dying to do, and work was not a problem. And I just said, okay, I let's do this. So I just really was more scheduling people to take care of me during the days where I was down. But chemo was not as bad as I thought.
Well, good.
Yeah,
I'm
and
glad. I'm glad. You see your personality, you can tell is like kind of like roll up your sleeves and dive in, like,
yes,
okay, here we go. And I can relate to that. That's very, we're very similar that way. And
yeah,
I'm just curious too, like now, you've been caring for other people and helping other people, and now you're got to
you're right.
prioritize your own healing.
Yeah.
So what was that like to have kind of this role reversal in some ways of like now you're the recipient of the care?
Yeah, I actually handled it very well. And friends were like, you need to ask for help. I'm like, oh, I am. I am calling you
Yeah.
to pick me up some groceries. So
Good.
yes. A friend had started a meal train for me, which was amazing. She wanted to do a fundraiser. I said, no, I don't need the financial help, and I don't want to take away from other people who could use it. So I was very adamant about that. But the meal train was great. And I had so many people donated Grubhub for me, which was really useful. But I
Because your
totally
taste
accept.
changed, right? Like the
Oh my
chemo.
gosh,
Yeah.
completely. I was always, well, not always, but I was hungry, but I had no craving. That was the hardest. Not the hardest with cancer, but
Hmm.
that was so hard with figuring out with the eating wise. I just had no cravings. So, but chemo went well. And then I took a month off and had the double mastectomy in July. And again, I was really nervous about the pain, about being home, being in bed, and just being in excruciating pain. And I wasn't. It
Good.
wasn't that bad. It hurt because I had deep flap where they used tissue from your stomach as the reconstruction,
Oh,
and it was
wow.
done all at the same time. So I had a very large incision in my waist. So, that was, just getting up and getting down. I had,
It's
10
surgery. It
10
is,
seconds of pain and
yes.
then it would be gone.
Well, I
So,
am grateful that and you've given some good tips about how people can support people because, again, we need some people just need to be told like this is how, how you can
yeah,
help.
yeah,
Um,
but I can't say enough to women and non-binary women, or non-binary, I should say, is to get mammograms yearly. Some say every 2 years is okay. I do not agree because I was negative a year
Insurance
ago.
says that.
Yeah, unless your insurance doesn't cover it and you cannot afford it. I totally understand. But if you can, and it's just something you don't enjoy doing, get your yearly mammograms. It's so important. And I'm just really advocating. I've been posting a lot on social media, and two friends who had not done mammograms in a while did it, and they have can't, they got
Oh, they
diagnosed.
did.
Yeah, but early, and they were able to catch
Early.
it.
Yeah, which
Yes.
makes the difference. I mean,
Yes.
it can make a big difference. And
Hmm.
I know for me, like I didn't do a self check for years, and then I started was like, you know better, you need to do better. And What works for me is a reminder on my phone. Like it literally
Yeah.
pops up once a month, like, hey, and then of course my going in to get the mammogram is
I wouldn't have
non-negotiable.
found, yeah, I would not have found mine on a self
You
check.
wouldn't.
I never felt it. The doctors could not feel it. So it was only found through a mammogram.
Yeah, go in. I wish they would make it
Yeah.
a less friction appointment. Like I'm like, can't we just like put
I
put it
know.
like why
Uh,
does this have to be so
Painful.
yeah, not
Um,
fun. Like I mean not that it's going to
no,
be fun, but like can't we just go put our
I know.
boobs in something to take a picture? Like why
I
is
know.
not somebody we've done some amazing inventions people like or maybe it's out there and we just can't afford to have it in
Oh,
all
I would
these
donate to
places.
that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, like it's I
Every
think that would
woman would
help.
donate.
It would
Yeah,
only
every woman
help
would.
because then you wouldn't be like one, have this anxiety about the appointment. It's just like, oh, it's just something you do, something you do. I've also been, on a different cancer front, the reluctant on the colonoscopy, but I have that scheduled. So, and
I
I got
did
my
mine
kit.
last year.
Yeah. So like we're just doing it. Like this is self-care. This
Yeah.
is what real self-care looks like is getting
Yeah,
those wellness
and
appointments scheduled.
and speaking of self-care is really knowing your body as well. If you feel something and you're not comfortable with it, go get it checked. Um, little 7 to 10 days after surgery, I woke up and just something did not feel right. And I woke up my friend who was staying with me and I said, I need to go to the emergency room. And I had 2 blood clots in my lungs.
Mm,
And I knew something was wrong. And I immediately said, let's go get this checked. So, not ignoring things is so important. You're not wasting their time. So, knowing your body and knowing the red flags and going to get that checked
yeah.
is
I
important.
mean, especially family caregivers in particular are the worst about
Oh,
putting the appointments on themselves because they're running
yes.
everybody else around to all theirs. But people, like,
Hmm.
what happens if this ship starts to crumble? The rest of the foundation, we are the
Yeah.
foundation, like to
And
your point earlier.
my siblings and I had to talk that what if something happened to our dad before our mom because he had a bad heart. So we kind of had a plan B in case something had happened to him first. But the caregiver, you have to take care of that person. And whether it's a neighbor who's going through it, offer to do groceries. If it's an aunt who's taking care of your uncle, call, ask what you can do. They may not come to you and ask, so you have to go over and ask. And I just can't stress that enough, how important that is. Um, to try to be there for other people who are going through it and taking care of someone. It's difficult.
Yeah, good reminders. National Family Caregivers Month. I mean, I don't know why it's November. It's a short holiday month, but it's and think about caregivers all the time. But
Yes.
I'm just glad that you're on this side of the year that you've been having, Gina, and you don't have to. You can turn the calendar and kind of put this stuff
Yes.
behind
And
you.
I get to focus on the Bob and Diane Fund again, which
Yes,
I couldn't really focus on most of this year.
yeah, it brings you. It's something that brings you joy. Well, with that,
Yes.
we're gonna. I'm gonna ask you some lightning round questions from the Just for You Daily Self Care Journal. So I have some.
Okay.
This is my book that I hopefully helps people prioritize self care a little bit. Um, let's see. Oh, if you were to lose all your possessions, what item would you miss the most?
Oh my gosh. Um, I can't think of one specific item, but it's basically anything that belonged to my mother, or my grandmother. My sister and I both just cherish anything we inherited from them. If my grandmother touched a bowl, we both wanted it.
Oh boy.
Um, so, or you know what? I'm going to go with my mom's Olympic torch. Let me just say, she was not in the Olympics. She was the torch runner in 1985. She worked for Wells Fargo Bank, and they chose her as to represent. They were the sponsor. So I have her Olympic torch.
That's so
That is going to be
cool.
yes, yeah, and she
Yeah,
was
I
so
love
proud of me.
that. I love that. Well, Atlanta had the Olympics in
In
96. 96 is a
'96,
big year. I got
I went
married
with my
that year. Oh,
parents.
you did?
Uh
Yeah.
huh.
Well, we were at a lot of the events, but the torch, it did come by and I remember like we all got to kind of touch it, but to run with it,
Yes. Yeah, and you pass the flame, not the torch. So you get to
yes,
keep your torch.
that's
Mhm.
good. We all, yes, I love that. And it's very symbolic. It's like
Yes.
carrying the torch through life.
Yeah.
So you've had some of these, I think, this year, but how do you cope with a difficult day?
Um, I cope with a difficult day. Oh gosh, I mean, people would laugh at this.
That's okay. That's
I
what we
will
really want to know here.
I will curl up on the couch and put on Law and Order. That
Law and
soothes me.
order. Interesting.
Law and Order soothes, just totally soothes me. I know it's about rape and murder. It's crazy. I go to sleep to it. It just is comfort for me. And a bowl of popcorn and a Coke on ice. That's in Law and Order.
That
That's what
sounds
does it.
It sounds, I mean, to each their own. That's the thing.
I
Like, that's why
know.
we ask these questions, though, because self care does look differently for everybody, you know? And
Mm,
so, I get it. There's a lot of Law and Order to pick from, too.
yes, there is. There's 20
Yeah.
over 20 years and I've
Yes.
seen them all.
Oh, my goodness. Um, all right. This is a fourth thing of looking ahead. Describe what you want to be true in your life at this time next year. So, next fall.
Oh, next fall, healthy. Um, definitely healthy. And I see it where I am right now, healthy and happy. You know, like I said, I've left National Geographic after 21 years and have a much easier life now. COVID taught me a lot. And so I enjoy life much more now. And I want to continue doing that, traveling and continuing working on the fund and raising awareness and raising money for Alzheimer's. That's where I want to be in a year.
Yeah, I think it's fabulous. It's beautiful.
Yeah.
I think the pandemic definitely has taught us a lot of lessons, and then you've had
Hmm.
your own health scare as well. Like that's so big. Well, Gina, how do people stay in touch with you, learn more? Where's the best places to go to find out more about
Yep.
you and the fund?
So our website is the bobanddianefund.org. And on there, you could go to grantees and see all the amazing work that we have supported over the years. And it's just stunning. It's just inspiring and beautiful photography. And on there, also, if you want to submit, even for next year, we do it every year about September 1st. There's
Hmm.
a submission area. And where are in our press, it's seeing all the places that we've been published and podcasts and all of that. It's just, you know, we've been very fortunate. So, and reach out to me at bobanddianefund@gmail.com. I answer every email and or on social media. Please follow us. We are on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, and would love to hear from
I love it.
people.
Yes, so
Yeah.
check it out, bobanddianefund.org. Um, I am just so appreciative of knowing you and seeing your
Oh,
work that
thank
you
you.
and like that. I look forward to kind of hearing about the next award recipient or grant recipient
I
and
know.
lots of amazing stuff to come, Gina. Like very exciting. Thank you for making your mark in this what can be a horrible disease for many
Yeah.
families and shedding something positive
And thank
around
you
that.
for what you do. I mean, it takes a village. It really does. And I really appreciate what you do and
Thank
reaching
you.
out to me with the blog and doing the podcast. And yeah, I appreciate that.
Thank you. Well, I'm glad we got to spotlight your story, and I look forward to hearing more from you. So thank you so much, Gina, for coming on today.
All right. Thank you. Have a good day.
You too.